We've done a lot of work with Dance Collection Dance over the year, and specifically, it started this time last year on International Dance Day with a talk that we gave back there, a talk that was in that back room there. So it's lovely to have you all here, and it's lovely that we're able to use this larger space. Yeah, and I'm looking forward to it. And I'm also happy to say that co-director Claire Hopkinson is in the room. Many of you in the dance community will know her from her many years at the Toronto Arts Council. And it's great to have her join us here at the museum as we ramp up our programming and prepare to open daily, not just for special events, with our newly renovated exhibition space. So after this event, please feel free to join us, and you can see what the space will look like and see our plans for how the audiences will celebrate and explore Canada's performing arts heritage, not just theatre, or not just strictly theatre. Once what is now office space is going to be transformed into public museum space, and the museum opens the doors on a regular daily basis. And even before those renovations start, we're delighted with special events like this and the audience response to them. People have loved it, it's great. And Canada's Theatre Museum is delighted to work with Dance Collection Dance, as I say, for a whole year in this space, but we've worked together over the years and talked about the dream of, well, if either of us gets a home first, let's try and work together on some programming. So, and it's great to have the audience. So it's great to have you here today. Thank you very much for making that possible. And it's great to have us, our home here at the Elgin and Winter Garden Theatres, owned and operated by the Ontario Heritage Trust. And welcome. And now I turn it over to our dear friend, Amy.
Thanks, Mike. So for those who don't know me, I'm Amy Bowring, the Executive and Curatorial Director of Dance Collection Dance, and I want to welcome you to International Dance Day. Yay! Which this day was selected because it is the birthday of Jean-Georges Noverre, who is famous for creating what we call the ballet d'action, which was a key moment in the development of ballet as we know it today. So thank you, Jean-Georges Noverre. I also want to take a moment to acknowledge where we are, the land that we're on. Toronto is the traditional territory of the Huron-Wendat, the Anishinaabeg, the Haudenosaunee, the Métis, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. And it has been a site of human activity for tens of thousands of years, including dance. Dance was a significant part of Indigenous culture and spirituality. And today, Toronto is home to many Indigenous peoples who live and work and study on Turtle Island and in this specific place. And we're very grateful that we are also able to work and dance and live in this area. For my own part, I am a descendant of livyers, who were the people who lived year-round on the island of Newfoundland. And that European presence on the island of Newfoundland ultimately led to the extinction of the Beothuk people. So I just want to acknowledge that presence had such a negative impact there. One of the other negative aspects of the colonial presence was the banning of Indigenous dances from 1884 to 1951. It started with the potlatch on the West Coast, then the sun dance, and eventually there were all kinds of different restrictions about how and where and when Indigenous people could perform their dances. And then that finally came to an end in 1951. But if you take away an aspect of someone's culture for 75, 80 years, then a lot of that culture gets lost. And there have been tremendous people across this land who have been doing the research, finding the dances, reigniting the dances, and helping to ensure that aspect of Indigenous culture lives on. And I also want to take a moment to thank our funders, because public funding in Canada is a really important aspect of how arts and culture thrives, how heritage thrives. So I want to thank the Canada Council for the Arts, the Ontario Arts Council and the Toronto Arts Council, as well as the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada and the Ontario Arts Foundation. We also receive funding from Dolphin Gaming, which is a part of the gaming system across the city, and has been a tremendous assistance to DCD. But this specific program, Dance History Downtown, is supported by the Gatherings Project, Gatherings, Archives, and Oral Histories of Performance, which is a SSHRC-funded project across several universities and has multiple arts and heritage partners, including Canada's Theatre Museum and Dance Collection D'Oss were two of the partners as a part of that. So thank you very much to Gatherings. And now I want to take a moment to recognize our guest speaker tonight. So this is our second Lawrence and Miriam Adams Dance History Lecture. And of course, Lawrence and Miriam Adams are co-founders of Dance Collection D'Oss, which is 40 years old. Yeah. So throughout this year, we will be celebrating the anniversary, and we are lucky to still have one of our co-founders with us, Miriam Adams, who you will hear from later. But I also just wanted to talk a little bit about Seika Boye before she comes up, because Seika is a bit of a rock star in the dance and academia world. We have been friends for a very long time, since we started working together at Dance Collection D'Oss. Timed our children so that we wouldn't both be on maternity leave at the same time. But Seika is an incredible contributor to dance in Canada and to dance scholarship. She has had a career as a dance artist, working for different artists and companies across the country, and then came to DCD when she was doing her master's degree at York University. And worked with us for several years, and then went on to do PhD studies, and is now an associate as of July 1st. Okay, associate professor at the University of Toronto in the Centre for Drama, Theatre, and Performance Studies. She also created the Institute for Dance Studies, which is an entity within the university that does various kinds of programming related to both movement and to theory as it relates to dance. She is a curator, and with DCD in 2018, she curated the exhibition It's About Time, Dancing Black in Canada, 1900 to 1970. No, 1980? No, 1970. Yeah. And since then, that exhibition has toured to several different places in Canada, recently just wrapped up in Halifax. And at the back here, you'll see the 6 panels that came out of that exhibit. This was a project that we did with Dance Immersion, whose founder is right here, Vivienne Scarlett. And they were on display at the International Association of Blacks in Dance conference, and have toured to Regina and are here for you to see. So they will, other people will get to see them. And we've got a couple of our other sort of mobile exhibits and other educational materials on display back there. So those were things that kind of tied into this pillar of Dance Collection D'Oss, which is publishing, archives, education, and research. Those are sort of the 4 main pillars of Dance Collection D'Oss's work. So on that note, I will bring forward Seika Boye, our guest speaker.
Can everyone hear me? Am I on the mic? Yeah, okay. Good evening, everyone, and thank you, Amy, for the introduction and for inviting me to be the speaker for the Lawrence and Miriam Adams lecture. I say yes to DCD and Miriam and Amy whenever I can. I won't go into it too much because really, when I was invited to do this lecture, Amy said, you can talk about whatever you want. I said, Amy, please help me to shrink the possibilities. And I quickly came around to wanting to talk about Dance Collection Dance is a place of education. It was pivotal for me in my life, and as I'll talk about, it's continued to play a significant role in dance and education in Canada and internationally. And I'm just going to dive in so I don't say my whole lecture in the introduction. So the title of my, and Happy International Dance Day. Yes, and there are so many clips and things going around, but what came to mind for me is when the astronauts were orbiting and on that fantastic journey, the photo was sent back of them all hugging. And I thought, wow, what a beautiful thing to share. And I thought the closest thing I know to that is dancing with people on stage in the dark with the lights. And what a lucky, lucky thing to feel like I've experienced anything close to being in space. Today I'm going to talk about Dance Collection Dance's legacy as a hub of education. I worked at Dance Collection Dance on site for 4 years and then in a freelance capacity for 3 or 4 years and have continued my relationship in different ways since then. Here is Amy Bowring lecturing during the Nesta to Me Backdrop project. When I was thinking about how to anchor talking about education, I really came to the idea of experiential learning. And I do lots of things. I have a lot of education. I curate, and we see the things that are posted on Instagram about activities, but what I spend 8 months of the year doing is teaching. It's what I do, it's what I think about. It is a lot of what drives me. My appointment at the University of Toronto is a teaching stream position. So my research and thinking and writing is also about how we learn and how we teach. And Dance Collection Dance was pivotal in my development as a scholar, but also as an educator because of the opportunities that I had learning there. Experiential learning, which is a term that's used in education and a lot in post-secondary education right now, is a theory of learning that conceptualizes the process of learning from experience, so our lived experience, or learning by doing, which dancers do, right? We learn by doing. We just have to do it over and over and over and over again. I've spent the last 3 years as an experiential learning fellow at the University of Toronto, and so have learned a lot about how to break down and think about experiential learning. And I built an internship course in which I have students who are in their 4th year, so their graduating year, going into 6-month placements with cultural and performing arts organizations in Toronto. And this is an article that was shared by the University of Toronto News Media. And Dance Collection Dance is one of the organizations where we had an intern go for that first year. When I first started thinking about experiential learning, and we had conversations, we're part of a cohort when there's a fellowship at the University of Toronto where professors come together in a class and we learn together. And people asked us if we had examples of experiential learning, and I said, well, the time I spent working in an archive and publisher after I finished performing. And so here are images of Dance Collection Dance's original home, which was Lawrence and Miriam's home. And it was housed here, I believe, from 1986 to 2013. And here is the desk where I worked for 4 years. So many people came in and out of that room to work at the desk facing out the window. Two real standouts for me were Nadia Potts and Veronica Tennant. I remember just sitting there typing and a bit frozen. But then also, I mean, they were so warm and we chatted and that all happened, but it really impressed upon me so quickly working at Dance Collection Dance as dancers, really the stars of our dancing communities were coming in and out of there. And I saw how quickly and how meaningful it was to them to have a place like DCD recording their legacies and archiving their work. As part of International Dance Day and this lecture about education, I feel that it is essential for me to acknowledge another very important teacher in my life, And her name was Barbara Zacconi. She passed away from breast cancer in 1998. I had been in university for 3 years at that point. She was my ballet teacher from middle school through to high school. And she is also the one who said to me, when she saw that I was frustrated and had some philosophical issues with ballet and also with competition dancing. I grew up in a competition studio, and Barbara was a teacher who came there, sort of midstream for me. She hadn't been there in my early education, ballet education, but she did arrive later. And she, for me, was one of the first teachers who really emphasized artistry and personal expression. And she also said to me, Seika, you should go and find modern dance. There are these other people doing other kinds of dances where dances are ideas. And I sort of thought, okay. And I want to carry Barbara through this lecture because when I had been at DCD for a couple of years, I found this photo. And this is Barbara in the middle. And here she is here. And she was one of the original 15 dancers. She passed away 6 years before I ever set foot in Dance Collection Dance. And so this, when I was thinking about this lecture, I was thinking about the people who teach us, who take us by the shoulders and point us in a direction that they see may be of value for us. And that was Barbara. And Barbara, when I think about her as a member of 15 Dance Lab, and I've read about all of the work that she did in Hamilton, Ontario, where I grew up, I see too that she was looking for a way to turn her experience of dancing into a lifetime of work in ways that were meaningful. And she worked for the Hamilton Arts Foundation. She was on juries for some of the artistic dance competitions in the city, and of course was connected to Miriam and Lawrence. So I'm going to walk us through the decades at Dance Collection Dance. This is the launch of their 40th anniversary, and some of the work that they have done leading towards becoming an educational hub. In the first decade, and I have to thank Amy Bowring because a lot of this came from me saying, Amy, I have a list of questions for you, or do you have data about this? And Amy said, no, I don't have data. I have my memory. And also, we only have the data that the funding agencies ask us for. And if education hasn't been something that was valued or measured, we won't necessarily have the data. And so in the 1990s, Lawrence and Miriam had an arrangement with the National Film Board and Mose Mozanen. The National Film Board duplicated and distributed VHS copies of the NFB films about the Royal Winnipeg Ballet and the Dance Maker series. So I'm going to list activities where we see that there is a push to distribute and share and provide resources for education. I'm also going to try and read some of the opening remarks from the 15th anniversary newsletter. Turning 15 shouldn't be a big event, and in many ways, 15 years for DCD means that we are only beginning to find our stride. However, it is timely to measure what has been achieved and what is next. Among our most important accomplishments is the establishment of a beachhead for Canadian dance literature, 16 books in the last 6 years. As a storehouse of Canada's theatrical dance life, the archives has and is still growing. Our initial concentration has been on researching and collecting from the first half of the 20th century. This decision has proven to be wise. As the century closes, we have had direct access to the people who built what contemporary dance people are now able to take for granted. The record to date shows good times and bad times. Sound familiar? We are now beginning to make inroads into the 1960s and 70s, the time of the dance boom. The major difference in this era is that because of videotape, we can now see dance works and performances. Previously, we had been satisfied with playbills and an occasional stage photograph. In this new era, we will be able to see choreographic works in their performance. Extensive planning has gone into this next stage of preservation. DCD archives will be confronted with the task of restoring early videotapes that are deteriorating every day. Over the next 5 years, DCD will have to install specialized facilities for this video preservation using the next generation of stable storage media, DVD. This will pose a formidable challenge for the DCD, but the rewards have enormous potential. It means the dance works will have a life for the next 100 years. This is one of the covers that was on the Dance Makers series, but also the teacher's guide that Dance Collection Dance created in order for teachers to bring the videos into their classroom. It's very difficult for teachers to talk about dance meaningfully and with confidence unless they have a guide to do so. Even to this day in education curriculum, people who have a dance background and dance focused are folded into the theater pedagogy and learning and teaching theater courses at OISE, for example. And so if there aren't resources to teach dance, people don't teach dance or dance history. And of course, book publishing. Publishing, Amy says, was motivated by Dr. Selma Odom, who's here with us today, saying that they couldn't teach Canadian dance history without books. To date, DCD has published over, and this is blank, 44 books, because I knew the number just changed, right? Yes, please. And here we have 2 books. They weren't published during this era, but they were Canadian Dance Visions and Stories had just been published. It was edited by Selma Odom and Mary Jane Warner when I started my master's. And it was incredible to have this collection of essays and reflections that weren't present in my undergraduate degree. And it was very meaningful to read about people who had been dancing in Canada and not always having to defer or look to the United States and trying to draw equivalents where really there aren't direct equivalents, right? We're always trying to project ourselves into those stories about other people. And then, of course, Betty Oliphant, The Artistry of Teaching, and the late Nadia Potts was working on this book when I started at Dance Collection Dance. And it also has the images that Rhonda Ryman generated in dance forms. Yes. And so this is an example as well, as we hear in the notes from Lawrence and Miriam, about the foresight in terms of adopting technologies in order to be in step or ahead of the game in terms of education and knowledge mobilization, as we call it, in post-secondary and in the academy, but sharing the information we have with others. Decade 2, 1996 to 2005. And I've identified here from Amy's list that this is really where knowledge and skills transmission started to come into play. And transmission means teaching people. So embodied transmission is when, Julia, when I took your classes in the 90s over on DuPont, transmission is when you do something and we all do it together and then we learn it and practice it. Knowledge and skills transmission is really the way of learning as it happened at Dance Collection Dance, and we'll talk about this later. Lawrence and Miriam welcome their proto-mentee, as she has called herself, Amy Bowring, in freelance capacities from 1993 to 1998, when she became a full-time employee. They trained her in collections management, rehousing, a little bit of conservation, and storage, building shelves with Lawrence. Knowledge and skills transmission becomes a focus of Dance Collection Dance's operations. DCD publishes the first English language encyclopedia focused on theatrical dance in Canada, edited by Susan McPherson. In 2003, Lawrence passed away, and with support from the Laidlaw Foundation, DCD published Building Your Legacy, an archiving handbook for dancers. And so we see at this critical moment, and I should say, I didn't ever meet Lawrence. I didn't know Lawrence. Everything I know of Lawrence is a story through Miriam or Amy or Selma or Carol or the other people who knew him. But I do remember when Building Your Legacy, an archiving handbook for dancers, was being distributed, and we were mailing them and stuffing envelopes. And so when I came to DCD, which I'm about to get to, I entered at a time where that sharing how to do what you had been doing for decades with dancers and with other people. So in the meantime, because this talk is a little bit autobiographical, from 1999 when I graduated from York to 2004, I lived in Vancouver and was dancing around, as Miriam likes to say, and then was in Montreal and dancing around, and then came back to Toronto because I wanted to do my MA, and I wanted to do it at York University. During the summer, I got a temp job in the York Dance Department, and enter Carol Anderson as a really important bridge. I think I say here, I was ready to quit performing, and I wanted to write. It's something that it's a pull I've always had, and I thought I'd do one or the other, and lots of other things. But enter Carol. I was taking Carol's classes. They let me take breaks from the desk and go down and dance and train, which was wonderful. But I also had a lot of great conversations with Carol, and she said, I think there's someone you should meet. They're looking for some help. And here is a photo. Amy and Miriam also sent me a wealth of photos over the last few days. And this here is another bridge, much like the photo with Barbara Zacconi and Miriam and Lawrence and the early 15 dancers. For me, this is another bridge that Carol saw that I might find something of value working at Dance Collection Dance, and she was right. And here is a very young Amy Bowring to the right. And that I entered the organization at a time of such great loss. So I went for an interview to 145 George Street, and it sounded like this. So Seika, what can you do? This is Miriam. Seika, anything you teach me how to do. And Miriam said, you're hired. I tell this story to my internship class. This is the attitude that you should go into your placements and into learning with, is if you teach me how to do something, I will do it to the best of my capacity. I couldn't do everything well. I'm not a copy editor. I'm not even a terrible copy editor. I just sort of don't even try. That's the editing of details and spelling and punctuation. I'm a great substantive editor, big ideas, but Amy is still my eagle eye. And there's a letter missing and 2 slides ago. So here we are in 2006, which is entering decade 3. And this is the gang. Can you see that, Miriam? I can. Okay, I didn't know if it was angled enough. So in this photo from 2006, and the gang is what it was called in the folder, are myself, Miriam, Tal Aronson, Amy, and her son, Nicholas. And this is in Miriam's living room, and it was really the hub of conversation. It's where we ate lunch every day, and where so many people from the dance community came all of the time to talk, to share, to ask for help. So in decade 3, public exhibitions, school visits, training new staff and volunteers. DCD hires numerous part-time staff to contribute to ongoing and expanding activities. Myself, collections, publishing, and marketing. Tal Aronson was a volunteer for the library subscriptions list, which before online databases was a laborious and critical activity to keep your subscriptions list up to date. So that's a great volunteer service that Tal gave there. Carolyn Clare, collections and exhibitions. Emma Duran, collections and publishing. Natasha Frid, marketing and early social media. Samantha Mara, development. Cindy Brett, collections and exhibitions. Sarita Hector, Kara Spooner, and Sebastian, oh, see there's another missing one, all worked on the dance education kits. And we see an image of that here. And so these kits, and Amy, maybe you can speak to them more later, were put together to be mailed out, right? And shared for people to use to animate the dance history that they were reading about. These are 2 more images of this space. Again, this is the living room. That's my favorite chair. I loved seeing these photos today because this precedes smartphones. So we don't have the wealth of images. And I mean, I haven't seen this room in, I don't know how long, neither of you, right? And so I was grateful to see it because we used to eat lunch together every single day. And that is something that I don't think people do in the same way anymore. And I think it was an incredible aspect of the learning that happened at DCD because that's when you told stories. And here is the VHS and film reel collection. And part of my work, especially towards the end of my time working in-house at DCD, was to digitize this collection. And it was through a Metcalf internship grant. And I worked full-time for a year. So as part of this reflection, I made myself complete an assignment that I give to my students, and a big part of experiential learning is reflecting on the work that you're doing so that you have a better understanding of the skills that you're acquiring, the challenges that you face, and your contributions to your workplace. So these are the questions here, and I'll just read through some of my very quickly drafted responses. So the first question students have to answer is make a list of the tasks you worked on or completed during your first 4 weeks. I changed it to years. Include all tasks. The point is to see the accumulation of all that you have done and to have a comprehensive list to refer to for your reflection. So I updated over 500 file fonts. I worked on photo permissions for David Earle's book. I did substantive editing and photo editing for Peggy Baker's book. I digitized VHS tapes. I worked with photo permissions for magazine and book publishing. I changed light bulbs, stuffed envelopes, assisted with offsite collections relocation, which is a fancy way of saying cleaning out an old dirty locker down on Cherry Street where things were stored. I mean, the collections and storage has changed a lot in Toronto over the last few decades, but that was offsite collections relocation. It was hot, sweaty, hard work. Attended a marketing course paid for by DCD at TMU. Do you remember that, Miriam? Yeah, you paid for me to go and do a marketing course at TMU. I don't think I was very good at it. I made up some weird commercial with a Joni Mitchell song. I don't think I was very good at it. I might be better now. I observed Amy bring her baby to work and then work. And I observed Miriam run a major operation with minor resources, a wealth of community, connection, and investment. Question 2, use this list to write a summary of your work and how you understand it contributed to the organization. During my time at DCD, I fulfilled small tasks that contributed to larger, long-term outcomes essential to the maintenance of an archival collection and momentum of a book and publishing cycle. I learned to understand that seemingly small tasks are actually the heart of an operation. By learning how to do multiple things, I was able to complete what was needed as it was needed. I think I was good company at lunch because we laughed all of the time. Describe the areas of learning from your studies and training and how they informed your work. The Institute for Dance Studies advocates for the value of embodied and dancing knowledge beyond performance because I think it really matters in our society. And I thought about that in answering this question. So how did my training before coming to DCD inform my work? My history classes, Selma, and Anna Bluchamp, who's not here, helped me to contextualize, ask questions, look for and recognize patterns. My dance training enabled me to describe photos of dancing from both the perspective of specialized and embodied knowledge. My lit theory degree enabled me to ask critical questions about identity, power, institutions, and of course, art. My composition and improvisation classes helped me to know when to join in, change course, see the bigger picture, and get creative. Dancing most days for 25 years taught me discipline, observation, joy, perseverance, camaraderie, and to find a rhythm in everything. Number 4, what new skills have you acquired or developed from this time? What did it feel like to move from a place of not knowing to a place of knowing more than you did before? New skills, processing archival materials, editing, acquiring copyright permissions, time management, professional communication, how an organization functions, preparing a massive mail out, wrapping and mailing books, which I hadn't thought about in so long, Miriam, and walking to that little post office, organizing events and fostering community. And then how did it feel to go from a place of not knowing to knowing? I'll talk about when I talk about that terrifying machine. Name one thing you've learned that wasn't directly related to the task you were assigned. I learned at DCD and continue to learn that learning new technologies always leads to new ways of thinking about old or familiar materials, and that new technology always becomes old technology, but to take time to understand the different iterations of those technologies as they emerge. Name one challenge that you faced. The paper cutter in the basement. So when we were talking about George Street, Amy and I both mentioned the terrifying paper cutter, and terrifying not because I felt like I was in actual danger, but in the basement were the old, like the printer, right? It was upstairs, and downstairs was just this. And so we had to take, Amy, can you say how it worked? This is the blade.
So the little wheel at the front basically operates the compressor. So you put your papers, or in our case, Lawrence used it to trim the edges off the books that he would bind after he converted the toaster oven into a bookbinding machine. And you put your papers on the table part, you turn the little wheel moves back, it moves that panel back and forth so that you can shove the paper into the space where you want it, where the blade is going to come down, right? So it helps you get it in the right place. And then you turn the big wheel on the top, and that lowers a sort of compression device that then puts weight on all that paper and keeps it in place while you're cutting. And then you take that massive lever and you go with all your weight like this to get the guillotine blade to come down and chop off your paper.
Yeah, thank you, Amy. I did not.
How many sheets can you do?
Well, this is a great question, but it was scary. So what did I do in the face of this challenge? I slowed down, which is not my default mode. I practiced, and I put smaller piles of paper in, because too many papers, remember, it would, even with the weight, it would slide, and then you'd have to go and tell Miriam, like, I threw out this pile of printed paper, which cost money. Here are some photos of other people learning. So this is after I had finished working at DCD full-time with Carolyn Clare, and I think this is during the first exhibition at the Market Gallery, and Natasha Fritt. And I chose these two photos because DCD also educates people really from children to senior members of our community, and we see Amy here teaching older members of our communities, and then a high school group, I believe, in Vancouver. So 2006 to 16, which is still decade 3, the first exhibition at Market Gallery, Theatre Museum's Hart House Gallery, and at Church Street, where there was an exhibition space. Well, there briefly. The Dance Makers VHS tapes become available on DVD, which if you're teaching in a school or a university and there are no longer VHS players available, you need the DVDs. And so that's how we saw dance that we didn't see growing up when we went to school. It was through the VHS and the DVD. The Nested to Mean Backdrop Project, which we saw an image of at the beginning, at TMU, which was 5 drops per year over 5 years. And these were huge, full-scale backdrops that Amy led a project that had them hung at the TMU Theater, and students learned how to hang them, but then also talked about how they were made. And they were painted. And Touring Through Time exhibit, which was a different city every year to focus on history, and Amy would tour to that location to do a talk. Curricular interns are Young Canada Works students that Amy and Miriam mentored. Rachel Stevens, Laura DeVries Jenkins, Marissa Kelly, Elise Tigas, Tanvi Alam, Beth Kelly, Sarah Anderson, Rosie Spooner, Caitlin Ruffley, Amy Gilbert, and Hannah, the ballet dancer. Thank you. And there's Amy with one of the backdrops. Decade 4. This decade saw another relocation of DCD from Church Street to the current location on Carlton, and a massive relocation of the collection to Ajax. COVID shutdowns in a smaller space without a gallery led to more online programming, including the videos from the Encore Dance Hall of Fame. A partnership with Canada's Theatre Museum has allowed for the Downtown Dance Dialogue series. DCD commissions exhibition, including the award-winning touring exhibition, It's About Time, Dancing Black in Canada, 1900 to 1970. And I need to mention that because I had spent 6 years working on my dissertation. I noticed when I was updating 500 file fond that there wasn't very much representation of the Black population in Canada in that collection. I shared that with Amy and Miriam. I said, I'm going to do my doctorate. Stephen Johnson, who over here, wave Stephen, was my supervisor, and I worked very hard on that dissertation. And 3 or 4 years into it, they said, Seika, when you're finished, you should come and curate an exhibition. And it has toured to Edmonton, Vancouver, Halifax. I've connected to so many artists and community members, and it would not have happened without Dance Collection Dance. They continue to publish books, even though I feel like Amy always says we don't have the time or resources to publish books anymore. They do. When someone has an idea or sees a need to educate, they come to Amy and she says, yes, let's figure it out. And they just recently launched Still With Us, Stories of HIV, AIDS, and Dance in Canada. Beth Kelly, where are you, Beth? Is full-time collections manager and archivist and assists with training and mentoring. Amy took over as executive director in 2019. Miriam is still the founder and is still an advisor. Oh, and I want to say about Lawrence and Miriam here. I asked in my questions in our email thread, did Lawrence finish high school? Many people of his generation did not finish high school. And I asked Miriam, did you graduate from high school through the ballet school? Yes. And Lawrence had a grade 8 education, we learned. And I think it is so critical to emphasize that somewhere like the University of Toronto, or one of the top 25 universities in the world, the former president, Merrick Gertler, and current president, Melanie Wooden, have made a commitment that each undergraduate student will have an experiential learning encounter during their undergraduate degree, because universities understand that students need to learn how to do things through doing them and not just talking about them. And we need the people who learned in that way in order to do that, which is why Dance Collection Dance is one of the places where I send my students as interns. And in talking about Lawrence earlier, Miriam and Amy both said, yes, he finished school then, but he taught himself how to do things. And I think people who teach themselves how to do things know how to teach others. And that is part of why I really wanted to highlight DCD's role as a place and hub of education. And so now, to talk about what is happening, I'm going to invite Amy and Miriam to the stage, and I have some questions for them. Here's Miriam, Dance Sucks. I have this mug on my desk, and it's, Miriam, I don't know what that t-shirt was about. I can imagine in many ways, but what I take from it and why it's meaningful to me is dance actually can really suck sometimes. It can be a very hard life. People don't always understand it. Sometimes we go to see dance that, we're always lucky to go and watch it. There are lots of ways to interpret it, but for me, you're wearing that t-shirt and yet you have devoted your life to it. And I think, it inspires me more and more every year as I continue to work very hard. Here's Amy and myself at Word on the Street, just two little young buds of things. Although I think you're a mom by then. That's 2006.
Yeah, I was about to be a mom for the second time.
Yeah, and I was about to be a mom for the first time. We're so young. And then, and of course, I will conclude with the people we work with become our families. And here we have Amy, Selma, who taught both Amy and I, Miriam, me, my mom, and Amy's mom. And it really does indicate how close these relationships are and how meaningful they are. So Amy and Miriam, come on up to the stage. The first question that I have for Amy is about what you learned from Lawrence and Miriam about teaching other people. And so I guess you can start with your experience of learning from them.
Yeah, so like there was really no formal learning process, right? It's not like anyone said, oh, I'm going to teach you how to do stuff. It was about involving me in doing things and learning that way. And so they're both natural teachers, even though they will be the last to say that they are. But it was just that constant, like, knowing that they had to pass on the information. When I was very young, they said to me, we're not always going to be here, but DCD has to always be here, and we think you are the person who can look after it, and that we want you to learn everything there is to know about this organization. And so that was, I mean, I think you guys said that around 1995. I worked full-time and starting in 98. And yeah, took over in 2019. So it really, I count that as an apprenticeship that entire time. And it was even like building the shelves with Lawrence. That was when we got the DanceWorks collection, which was a quite sizable collection intake for us. And we needed more shelving in the offsite storage. So we went down with 2x4s and bits of wood, and we built the shelves together. And he actually taught me how to swing a hammer more efficiently than how I was doing it. You need to let the weight of the hammer part, do the work for you. So yeah, it was that, and learning how to do things like bind books and wrap books for shipping so that they don't get damaged. And
it's a big deal.
It's a big deal.
Books.
And Lawrence always said, always put out a good product. Always, focus on that. So it's the repeating, it's the doing that you were talking about, and also the duration of time.
Thank you. Miriam?
Yes.
Did you ever imagine when you and Lawrence started an archive, and maybe you can talk about why you started it, that you would also become teachers and mentors and be starting an organization that has mentored so many other people? When I was looking over that list of people that Amy sent, and not everyone made it into the slideshow, and that's only, a time management situation for me, but they're still working in arts and culture. And I think that says so much about the time that people spend at Dance Collection Dance. So, why did you start the archive? Did you imagine it would become a hub of education?
I'm an old ballet dancer. I never went to university. I don't have a BA or an MA or a PhD. So when I hear all this stuff and the terms of reference they use, it's all a mystery to me. I do not think of myself as a teacher or a mentor. And if you learned anything from me, you're lucky. No, I mean, whatever we were doing. Okay, so I'll try and go fast here. Lawrence was born in Winnipeg. His older brother studied with Gwyneth Lloyd and Betty Fairley, who started the Winnipeg Ballet. So David Adams was dancing, and Lawrence eventually started to dance. When we were in the National Ballet, Lawrence and Yves Cousineau, who was also a dancer at that time, opened a gallery called Adams and Eve. Very clever. Showing Canadian art. So we were picture framing and talking to artists, and I think they thought about and treated their discipline so much more differently than we did. They could talk about the history of the visual arts, and they knew who the great ones were and the mediocre ones, and they could go way. I didn't learn that in a ballet class. I was pointing my toes. I didn't know. Anyway, I was very impressed by the way these people thought about things. The Dance in Canada Association started, Selma. We were having annual conferences every year in different cities across the country. And the first one was at York University. And Paula Ross from Vancouver was there. And not only Paula, there were people from across the country that we'd never heard of them. We didn't know them. We were in Toronto doing our thing. Anyway, turns out that Lawrence and Paula had the same ballet teacher, Mara McBurney, in Vancouver. It was like a homecoming or something. Okay, Dance in Canada conferences, which went on for many years, and we kept meeting more people, interesting people. Then we started to do videotapes, and we were taping performances, and we were interviewing some of the pioneers, like Gwyneth and Betty from Winnipeg, who came to Canada in 1938. So that was part of that shtick. Oh, and then we started the 15 Dancers, and then 15 Dance Lab, and invited dancers from across the country to come and perform, and we would clean the toilets and wash the floor and raise the money, and they performed, and then we had to clean the toilets again and wash the floor. Okay. All the time videotaping, not the cleaning, the people. Okay, now just a second. Yeah, I have to drink some water here. This is the supplier. It is. Cheers. Okay, so 15 Dancers and WESIS, the video organization, and having met so many people through the Dance in Canada Association and 15, we decided that we were going to try and reconstruct choreographies that had been made in Canada in the 1930s and 40s, did a lot of research, gathered a lot of material, and invited 7, Gwyneth Lloyd and Nesta Tumine from Ottawa, I won't name them, but women who were working in the 30s, 40s, 50s. And we raised a shitload of money. It must have been a good time for raising money from the government. Marcel Mass was there. He was the Minister of Communication. It was a conservative government. Anyway, we had somebody who believed in us at the government, and his name was Keith Kelly, and he was a bureaucrat, and he worked for Marcel Mass. And he believed in us. It was just one of those things. You people are doing good work. This is important. This is history. This is our country's history. We're going to help you. We raised a lot of money. We hired something like 65 people, and we reconstructed about 12 works from choreographers, as I said, in the 50s, 40s, videotaped them, hired a notator, Benish notation and Laba notation. I think it's a Laba notation score in there. All headed up by Rhonda Ryman. Okay. That was Encore. Then we did our first Hall of Fame in 1986 at Casa Loma, and we inducted 9? Whatever she says is right. No, it was more than 7. Anyway, but we had to assure that they were all over 80. Right? We were going to recognize them finally. And they were all over 80. And then we did a show at Expo, and we just gathered a ton of research material and said, now what do we do? So we went to the chief archivist in Ontario, I don't know who it was, and in Ottawa, and said, you have to take this stuff, documents and videotapes and a few costumes and just piles of stuff. And they said, no, we don't do that. We're not going to do that. We're going to take your stuff. So we said, all right, we'll do it. And that's how, okay, did I miss anything? No, well, and we started publishing books, and we were publishing newspapers when we were running 15 Dance Lab. In fact, Spill was one that we started with, and we asked the dancers to write and the audience to write. And we published it, and we didn't edit anything, and we got into a lot. I mean, if people can swear and then it gets printed and distributed, it makes them happy. Those were the 70s, you understand? It was a different time. But that was when the whole publishing thing started. And Amy, thank God for Amy, joined us in 93.
93.
Okay. And your first project was the Encyclopedia of Theatre Dance in Canada, was it?
Yeah, well,
I mean, publishing.
Yeah, publishing.
Yeah, publishing. It's, Seika, it's bilingual. We did a French and English all together in
Yeah,
one
it's
book.
right, even on the cover.
Yeah, it's on the cover. I just thought.
I read a description that said English language, so.
Oh, did
yeah,
it?
I did. Not from you, but I'll go back and change that.
Okay, no.
But
that's
also,
okay.
when did you do your MA in journalism, Amy? I feel like that's an important.
Yeah.
So, yeah, no, I graduated from York York in '94, and on Selma's recommendation, I went to journalism school at Western, which was '94, '95. But because I had done that summer work experience job at DCD while I was living in London, Ontario, Lawrence and Miriam continued to give me little assignments, mostly research assignments. And then actually the first thing I copy edited was Rhonda Ryman's Cicchetti Dictionary. So that was before I was really working for DCD. It was one of those I did little freelance jobs. Yeah.
Thanks. Miriam, do you still have to answer the education question? So, you've talked about the origins of DCD, but did you ever at any point start to think, okay, and now you were passing along information about how to maintain the organization, run the organization, know the organization to Amy, but at no point did you think, I'm a teacher, I'm going to mentor and teach these people?
Never. I mean, I wouldn't have even fit that into my description of what we were. The thing about all of that, we did a lot, and all of it was like, you get this done, and then you raise the money, and then you do the next one, and then you don't get the money, so you can't. I mean, that was a lot, and we had a lot of fun, and we met wonderful people. Those were the best days. And I was choreographing at that time, and so was Lawrence. So we were doing shows. Crazy. But no, I never thought of that, Seika, but thank you for placing me in that category, in that terminology.
Well, thanks for being that category. I mean, really, you're placing it because you were, and I think that you taught by inviting us to do something that helped you finish all of the things you were doing. And that we would do a small thing, and if we did it well, we would then do a slightly bigger thing, right? It's the accumulated knowledge, which they also call scaffolded learning, which in ballet is like you have to plie before you can jump. I mean, dancing really is the technique. You need to learn one layer before. I think that dancers are inherently primed to teach and break things down. Amy, maybe we can end, and Miriam, I invite you to reflect on this too. Education is one pillar of DCD, but there are many pillars within that education because you mentor people who come in to work at the organization, but then you also do outreach and education, direct teaching. You teach at TMU and have for over a decade, 18 years, nearly 2 decades. So can you talk about those different pillars of education itself?
Sure.
And then we can take questions from people if you have them.
Yeah. I mean, you outlined that very well. So yes, there is the educating the general public through our books and our magazine and our website, our virtual exhibitions and our live exhibitions. Then there's educating the dance community, which has largely been through the grassroots archiving program, where we've been, and Lawrence is building your legacy book, where we've been teaching artists how to look after their materials while they're still generating them so that they're, in good shape and kept well and not in attics and basements and things like that. And then there is, yes, educating the next generation, which can be, I didn't even get into in our conversations, all the mentorship we've done with young writers, but there's been tons of that. I mean, I obviously mentored by them with agonizing editing sessions, but good, my God, I learned so much from that process. But we've mentored a lot of young writers who've come to the magazine, and then, of course, taking on curricular interns or funded interns through the Metcalf Foundation or Young Canada Works, that kind of thing. And I really take those seriously. Like, I'll design an internship so it's like, okay, you need to learn how to build a banker's box. Now you need to learn how to build a custom box. Now you have to understand the difference between acid-free and acid, and all of those different things. So I actually take a pedagogical approach to those internships. And yeah, I think that's it. Public, artists, next generation. I think that's what it is.
Great. Miriam,
Yes.
were you going to say something?
No.
Oh, I thought you were. Okay, I'm going to ask you one more question, Miriam. What have you observed about Amy as a teacher? Do you see her as a teacher and mentor? Like, you have not seen yourself in that way, but you've watched Amy since 1993.
Amy is an exceptionally bright and talented a woman who can, you learn very quickly. She could, when Lawrence passed away, and I'm still raising money, trying to keep the door open, and of course Amy is there. She could do anything, but you had been taught by Lawrence how to do book layout and building shelves and stuff like that. So, what was your question, Sarah?
It was just about Amy as a teacher and a mentor, watching her take on that role over time.
And I watched her, and as a matter of fact, the School of the Toronto Dance Theatre came to us every February, and there were 25 of them, and they came into the house. It was in the middle of winter, and both Amy and I don't know, we talked at them, and we told them things, and she was very engaging. I don't know. I think wait a minute. I'm going to make nice things about people. These two people are exceptional. Now, it helps when you're in an environment that allows you to be yourself and to ask lots of questions and to get multi-layered answers and all. But you have to have the curiosity and the need and the want to get things done and a sense of accomplishment afterwards. And they both had that. And there were others who came to us who were very talented. So,
but it's also about how you also just let us try, right? Like, if we had ideas, and like when you were doing the photo editing for the David Earl book, like, you just let her rip, right? Like, Seika just put all her research skills, her communication skills, everything, and then, pulled together hundreds of photos for that book, right? There was a ton of research in that. And that was the thing, that you let our ideas flow, and you let us come up with stuff and try it out and experiment and fail and repeat and succeed. And so that's a big part of it.
Did I ever say, do it again, that's bad? Or
Yes, totally.
All the time. But here's why it was okay. You said, here's why you have to do it again.
Yeah. Yeah.
And here's what to focus on when you try again. You told us all the time.
Yeah.
Now, Seika,
I think I'm too much.
This is no good like this.
Yeah. No,
but
and I'm too much of a softie, I think, as a teacher. I think I have
as an
to,
editor, though.
Not as an editor, but I think I need to not let certain things go, because I have to keep thinking of that. Always put out a good product. Always put out a good product. And yes, if we were not up to snuff, you and Lawrence let us know, but in a good way. Yeah, you weren't mean about it.
Never mean, and you were never attacking us as people.
No,
it was always
job.
Focused on the work.
Yeah.
This to separate these paragraphs, or you have to. That was a big one.
Yeah, little tweaks, and yeah, it's good. It's all good.
Yeah.
I'm learning new things today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Do people have questions? Should we open up? What time is it? Okay, great. Any questions or comments?
It's so fascinating. Thank you. And, I'll speak loudly. And I was just thinking about what you were saying about that you were allowed to do all these things. And I'm thinking about all the experiences I've had and how many things I've been allowed to do. But we were allowed because they needed to be done, and there was nobody else who was going to do them. And then there was this recognition of smart, generous people who were prepared to do it. And I'm just thinking about that in regard to the difference of that and that mentorship and that need to do the project versus the formal training side of things.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Because I grew up not being trained to do anything. I mean, so read.
Yeah, that learning on the fly and the experiential learning, and learning and also learning how to fail. That's such an important part of learning. We tell that to our kids all the time. Failure is one of the best ways to learn.
One other question. Miriam, did you say to yourself at some point you really only wanted to work with people who you wanted to work with? The people you liked and valued?
Well, I would say that, and I may think that I did work with people that I didn't like working with because they happened to be there and it was convenient that they be there and we had the money and we needed to hire somebody. And yeah, there were some we had some terrific problem to people, but that's part of the grand pageantry of life, right? I mean, not everybody, you don't love everybody, but I mean, these people are special. No, but yeah.
Thank you. Beth, and then Selma.
I guess kind of a bit of a comment, but something I think is important to highlight about this organization, because I did a formal museum studies program, and one of the things I saw that I had already been exposed to DCD before I went there, I already knew how they operated, and I came in and very, very quickly learned that I've had people call, when I talk about the way that we operate, they have called it rock and roll a lot, and I have seen other heritage professionals be almost scared a little bit of saying, oh, you just do things. If you have a problem, you just solve it. Because we are a very unconventional organization in that we were founded from within the community. Like most archives or museums are founded by professional associations, churches, or universities. We were none of those three things. Nobody had formalized training at the beginning. There weren't these people who'd gone to library school or archive school or worked in a county archive or what have you. And you just got things done. It's a very dance mentality. And it has carried us a lot farther, and it allows us to do things that other organizations are very scared to do. And starting with that so deeply entrenched in the very foundation of what that organization is, it's made exhibits like that possible. Like I've sat in rooms with people saying, well, how did you do that? Well, we just did. And that is such an important part, and it allows us to go so far in a way that other places just can't, and it's because of the way Miriam Boye set it up from the get-go, and the way that everyone has then, you come into that space, and just from the start, that's how everything operates. Like there is no hesitation around things, and that is really important.
Yeah, that's true. That's huge. Yeah.
Selma, you had a comment.
Oh, my comment has to do with just sort of looking back a bit and thinking how important it was that things were the way they were at 15 in the 70s. I'm glad you mentioned Spill and the gradual publication of so many books and also the magazine Dennis Collection House, because there were places for people to write that didn't exist before. And a lot of my former students did that writing, actually, starting with Spill. And I just think that because there was the place for thought and discourse and writing about dance, it sort of helped a lot to make this archive later happen, because people had that sort of potential to take charge of putting it into words and of making those videos like the business people were doing. They were documented. And I just sort of feel that it's a really important base of this as an educational experience or as a collaborative education, which is real way it felt. I rarely felt I was mentoring my students. It was more like we were working together. You know, we decided we wanted to make a little journal, so we made this New York dance review. And that was where I was working with Rhonda and, you know, with Carol, all these people. And when we decided to start doing articles, historical articles, we made these Canadian dance studies, you know, print it yourself compilations, which then later fed into the book Canadian Dance, Visions and Stories. But it was more like elbow to elbow doing the work.
Yeah, I want to add to that. So, because what hasn't come up, my first introduction to dance publishing was actually working with Selma and Mary Jane Warner on what became Canadian Dance Visions and Stories. It was a work study job in my 4th year, and I did all the computer stuff. And so Selma and Mary Jane and the other editors would sit beside me and say, take out that comma, change that word. And I would look, and I had the opportunity to ask questions. That's where I first learned about adjectival phrases, was because of Selma. So it was that, like, just sitting beside them, putting in their edits and asking, well, why is it that way instead of this way? And that was huge, Selma. That experience, and definitely was part of that trajectory to continuing in a journalism program.
Julia.
I have two things I'd like to say or ask. The first one is, do you think there will ever be an updated Canadian dance encyclopedia? I'm sure you get asked that all the time. And the second thing is, I was wondering if Josh Murphy could say a little bit about his experience at DCD as a working dancer, and I think you've been with the organization for quite a while, and what you've gotten from it, and why you keep doing it, and how you integrate your professional dance life with this aspect of your work, and why that's important to you.
Yeah.
So to address the encyclopedia, we have talked about that so many times. It took so much money and time to do it the first time that it's been really hard to find those two key elements to do. And we've talked about like doing it online, and all the deceased people those are accurate. But yeah, there's a lot of updating and new people, and I don't know, Julia. I mean, yes, I think it's a really important thing to do, but it's just, we're fighting every day just to, keep the organization going and raise its profile, and it's, arts is a fight, heritage is a fight. Arts and heritage, huge fight, as our theater museum colleagues know. So I'd like to say yes, but I don't know.
And I'll quickly add before we hear from Josh, and thank you for asking Josh to talk about his experience, Julia. DCD has also expanded the dance that it includes in its archive and publishing. And the encyclopedia is a theatrical dance encyclopedia. And so I think in order to reflect the organization, it would also require including all of the dance forms that DCD now includes in their activities, their collections, their programming, their publishing. That's not to say it's impossible, but it is even more time and money, because it isn't only updating those entries, it's adding the people who are working in theatrical dance since then, and then how do you add all of the other forms?
Hi. It's gonna be so loud, isn't it? Maybe I can just talk. Is that fine?
No, because the camera.
The camera needs it, of course. Okay, to answer that question, yeah, I'm so lucky that I get to work both professionally as a dancer and work with DCD. And first, I love working with DCD because I love working with Amy, truly. And so much about what Beth is saying about it's an opportunity to just do things and try things. And the amount of times Amy has just said, oh, I'm going to teach you how to do this thing. And I think doing my undergrad in dance, I had no idea what I was going to be doing afterwards. But through the various things I've gotten to at DCD, it can kind of all be a part of my artistic practice, my performance practice, learning practice. And even listening to this whole talk today, Seika, it was just kind of really inspiring to hear about your experience with Miriam, Amy, everyone. And I'm very happy to be working with DCD, and I hope I get to continue to do as such. So thank you for asking that, Julia.
We hope so too. And I want to say that because we're a Dancers for Dancers kind of organization, we try to provide flexibility. So Ashley Cullors-Perez and Josh Murphy are both practicing artists who also do some work for us. Josh just went on tour and just came back from tour, right? So we try to have that kind of flexibility in what they're doing so that they can go and do that. Ashley is about to go to Vancouver and teach a whacking workshop. So yeah, that's really important to us to be able to acknowledge a dancer's life in how hard it is to piece together a living.
It's amazing to work with an organization who trusts us to come back, but also trusts us to go and do these things. But I remember in undergrad, Susan Lee was one of my profs, and she talked about having a job like that who would trust her to go and trust her to come back. And I was like, always hoping I would find something like that, and kind of did. So that's cool.
Yeah, I think that's a great place to end. Thank you, Amy and Miriam, for inviting me and for our conversation today and for everything. And thank you all for coming. And I think, do we have time to hang out a bit, Michael? Or yeah? Okay, great. I might be ducking out a little bit because Hall of Jazz opened tonight and there's a party. And I worked on the show. Thank you all for coming. And thanks to the Theatre Museum, Michael.